Good morning, class. Today we are on lesson 116 of Saxon Book 4, and today's lesson is common denominators. Boys and girls, everything that you have been doing for the last couple of lessons is leading up to this skill, and this skill is so important as you go into 5th grade, because 5th and 6th grade is all about the fractions. So, common denominators. If we have more than one fraction, so 2, 3, 4 fractions, they have common denominators if their denominators are the same. So here the denominator is 8 and 8. These two fractions have common denominators. Here, 3/8 and 3/9, they're not the same, so they are not common denominators. Okay? The reason we want to turn fractions into common denominators is so that we can easily add or subtract them. I can tell you that 2 apples plus 2 apples is 4 apples. I can tell you that 2/5 plus 2/5 is 4/5. But I can't tell you what 2 apples plus 3 oranges are, because they're not the same. I still have 2 apples and 3 oranges. I can't tell you what 2/5 and 3/8 are, because they're not the same. I can't just combine them. So I have to find what they have in common. What do apples and oranges have in common? They're all fruit. What do 5ths and 8ths have in common? We could turn them all into 40ths. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. All right, so we are going to rename 2/3 and 3/4 so that they have a common denominator. So the easiest way to do this is to multiply each fraction by the other denominator. So here my 2/3 here, if I multiply that times 4/4, then I'm going to get 12ths in my denominator, and 4 times 2 is 8. So 2/3 is the same as 8/12. Here, I don't want to multiply it by 4/4, I want to take this denominator, and I want to multiply times 3/3. So 4 times 3 again is 12. Look, now I have a common denominator, and 3 times 3 is 9. So 3/4 is the same thing as 9/12. Does that make sense, Nyla?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so the next example, rename 1/2 and 1/3 so that they have a common denominator. Okay, 1/2 and 1/3. 2, I'm going to multiply times this denominator, so 1/2 times 3/3. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6, and 1/2 is the same thing as 3/6. Here I don't want to multiply times 3, because 3 times 3 will give me 9, not 6. But I want to multiply times 2, so I have to do 2 halves. Remember, whatever I multiply to the bottom, I also have to multiply to the top in order to keep it equal. So 1 times 2 is 2, 3 times 2 is 6, and here are my 2 fractions with common denominators. Okay, last example says to write 1/3 and 1/6 with common denominators. So this one's a little bit different. Look at my denominators here, Nyla. I have 3 and I have 6. Is 3 a multiple of 6? Or 6 is a multiple of 3, actually. I said that wrong. If I count by 3, I will say 6, right? So I don't have to change this one at all. I just have to make this equal to 6. What do I have to multiply times 3 to get 6?
2.
Just 2? How do I write it?
2 here. And 2 here.
And 2 here, I want to keep it equal. So same thing to the top and bottom. 2 times 1 gives me 2. 2 times 3 gives me 6. Is 2 6 and 1 6? Do they have common denominators? Are they the same?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 6 and 6. They have that in common. Okay, we have a couple of lesson practice problems. I will leave the definition up there, but get rid of this. All right, so for A, you are going to rename 1/2 and 1/5 so that they have common denominators. Okay? For B, you are going to rename, oh, you know what? It tells us. It tells us here that the common denominator should be 10. So I'll write that up there, okay? For these, make it have a common denominator of 10. For B, it tells us, let's just do C, D for common denominator. B tells us common denominator is 12, and the fractions they give us are 1/2 and 5/6. So it doesn't want you to use the common denominator of 6 here. It wants you to find a common denominator of 12, okay? For the rest of them, you're supposed to find the least common denominator, which means the smallest possible common denominator. So for C, you'll be doing that for 1/2 and 2/3. For D, you'll be doing that for 1/3 and 1/4. For E, 1/2 and 3/5. And for F, 2/3 and 2/5. Okay, if you would like to pause the video now, you can give this a shot and then hit play and we'll go over all the answers together. All right, for A, we need a common denominator of 10. So I'm going to put a 10 here for both my fractions. What do I have to multiply times 2 to get 10, Nyla?
5.
So whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 1 times 5 is 5 for an answer of 5/10. What do I have to multiply times 5 to get 10?
2.
Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. 1 times 2 is 2. So there's my answer. And let's switch markers because that one's dying. All right, over here, common denominator of 12. So I'm going to put 12 over here for both my fractions to start off with. 2 times what gives me 12?
6.
2 times 6. Whatever I do to the bottom, have to do to the top. 2 times 6 is 12. 1 times 6 gives me 6. What do I have to multiply times 6 to get 12?
2.
Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. 5 times 2 is 10. So here are my fractions with common denominators for B. C, we're looking for the least common denominator. So 2 and 3. Let's count by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Now let's count by 3s. 3, 6, 9, 12. What number did we say for both of those?
6.
We said 6. So I know that my least common denominator here is going to be 6. 2 times what gives me 6?
That would be
2 times 3 gives me 6. So 1 times 3 will give me my answer here. 3 times what gives me 6?
2.
So 2 times 2 gives me 4. And there's my answer to C. Okay, D, 3 and 4, least common denominator. Let's count by the big number, 4.
4.
Can I multiply 3 times anything to give me 4?
No.
8. Can I multiply 3 times anything to give me 8? 12. Can I multiply?
Times 4.
Ooh, okay, so 12 is going to be my least common denominator. 3 times 4 gives me 12, so 1 times 4 is 4. 4 times what is 12?
3.
4 times 3, so 1 times 3. There's my answer. Okay, 2 and 5. Let's count by 5s. I'm picking the bigger denominator to count by to decide if the little denominator is also a factor of those numbers. So, 5. Can I multiply 2 times anything to get 5?
No.
10. Can I multiply 2 times anything to get 10?
5.
Yes, I can multiply times 5. So 2 times 5 is 10. 1 times 5 gives me 5/10. Then my other common denominator fraction will also be 10. 5 times what equals 10? Nyla?
5 times 2.
So 3 times 2 is
Hold on, 6.
6. So here are my fractions with common denominators. And finally, 2/3 and 3/5. Can I multiply 3 times anything to get 5? 10. Can I multiply 3 times anything to get 10?
No.
15.
Yes, you can multiply it by 5.
I can multiply it by 5. So our common denominator here will be 15. 3 times what gives me 15?
5.
So 5 times 2 is
10.
5 times what gives me 15?
3.
So 2 times 3 is
6.
okay. That is the end of our lesson. I hope you have a wonderful day and we'll see you again soon.